Rugby World Rankings are out for the 20th of September, and there's a couple of pretty notable changes. We'll go through those in a sec and talk about the possible changes with a couple of rounds left in the Rugby Championship. And then remember, we've got November Rugby on the cards, but largely European Rugby is back at club level this month as well. New Zealand, with their victory over the Pumas, and the Springboks with their loss to the Aussies for 2 weeks in a row, it's meant these teams have swapped places. So the All Blacks have taken that number one spot back. They are up from 90.31 to 91.15, back to first in the world. It's been since the Rugby World Cup, when they were temporarily number one in the world. So it's been a wee while, but the All Blacks are back to number one in the world. Now, a lot of people say they don't care about the rankings, and that's fair enough. But I will tell you, it generated a fair bit of interest over here in New Zealand. It was in the news, basically. If it's newsworthy, then there must be at least some people caring about it. So there you go. New Zealand is number one in the world. South Africa dropped from 92.49 to 90.95. Now, one thing that's been, I could use the word interesting. I want to kind of say dumb about the way they've calculated the rugby rankings in the Rugby Championship is that they've not been counting neutral venues, or they've not been counting all home venues for the Aussies, which is mind-boggling, because I could be mistaken, but I'm fairly confident that when Argentina, because I remember looking at the World Rankings calculator and it went out exactly as planned, when Argentina were in Wales, they played away, but it was still counted as a Welsh home game, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody correct me if I am, but I am fairly confident that was the case. And yet for the Rugby Championship, despite the fact that all the games are being played in Australia from here on out, in the last couple of weeks, they've been counting, like last week's victory, a fortnight ago, of New Zealand over Argentina, as a home game, as if it was in New Zealand. And this weekend just gone as an away game for New Zealand, so as if it was in Argentina, which is just mind-boggling. And it means a fortnight ago, when the Springboks lost that first game to the Aussies, it counted as a Springbok home loss. Again, mind-boggling. This is Sansa. So that shouldn't surprise anyone, that a seemingly obvious decision that you should play them as, for World Rankings purposes, as neutral venues or Australia as a home team, to me that seems just common sense, but it's Sansa. So there you go. So yeah, keep that in your mind. That's why the All Blacks didn't go up last week when they beat Argentina, a fortnight ago, I mean. But they have gone up with this most recent victory because it counts as an away win, which is easier to pick up points with. So yes, Australia are now up to third in the world. Remember, it was only a couple of weeks ago they were in seventh. Now they're up from fifth into third. So they leapfrog England and Ireland. They are on 85.65, up from 84.11. So they've taken those points off the Springboks. England, Ireland drop. They haven't changed. Their numbers are in blue, so that's just kind of static. But they have been passed by the Aussies, so they are dropping on the board. The French are still there. The Pumas have dropped points, but not enough to drop them below Scotland, who are on 82.02. So it's only a very, very narrow margin between these two teams in 7th and 8th. There's nothing doing on the rest of the board from 9 to 16. Wales, Japan, Fiji, Georgia, Samoa, Italy, Tonga, the US, and beyond them it's Uruguay, Romania, and so on. So there's kind of nothing doing with those teams. None of them being in action over the last couple of weeks. So they're all pretty static. The last game I think we had outside there in the men's anyway was the US and Canada. So yeah, it is a bit of an interesting one. If you look forward to the Rugby Championship games this weekend, you've got the All Blacks against the Springboks, so it's number one in the world against number two in the world. The first game is counted as the All Blacks home game, but either way, if the Springboks win this one, they will go back to number one in the world, and the All Blacks will drop back down to number two. If the All Blacks give the Springboks a big hiding, and the Wallabies win, do they have a chance of passing the Springboks? No, the gap is still too much. So no matter what happens, New Zealand and South Africa will still finish 1 and 2 after this coming week's action. Argentina will drop below Scotland if they lose to Australia. Australia could drop back to 5th if they lose to Argentina, but Australia is not going up anyway. So Yeah, it's been a bit of an interesting one. If you look on Twitter, there seems to be a fair bit of outrage. There's always outrage on Twitter, which is a site I should probably avoid more, about the way the rankings are at the moment. And, you know, Wales is always the point of contention that they're ninth despite being Six Nations champions. I feel like a broken record saying this every week. But, again, one Six Nations campaign was good around a kind of a lost campaign to the RGs, and then a pretty poor 2020. So it's kind of the context, eh? I guess that's one thing about the world rankings, is that we should maybe not get too much kind of recency bias about us, right? Like a couple of weeks ago, when the Wallabies were on the back of a couple of, or 3 bad losses to the All Blacks, you would have thought, you know, they're lucky to be in the position they are. But then it only takes a couple of wins and suddenly they're a decent team in our minds. Like, you would have thought, there was a lot of talk about, oh, you know, the Aussies are wimps. The Box are going to give them a big old hiding. It only takes like a week for us. And I've seen the reverse happening now. There's a lot of calls, oh, the Springboks are going to get smashed by the All Blacks. Maybe we kind of need to look at the world rankings as if this is trying to tell you, don't just look at the most recent result and decide the team's fortunes based on that. It's more of a long stretch. So the Wallabies have kind of been eking their way up. They've never been a terrible team, even if they did suffer at the hands of the All Blacks. The Springboks are down a spot, but I would be saying they are by no means a bad team, so write them off at your peril. Argentina's in a pretty similar spot to Australia a few weeks ago, so again, write the Pumas off at your peril. Do you think Wales can do better than they are in ninth? Definitely can, but could you see the likes of a Fiji beating one of those top 8 teams? Why not on their day? So yes, that is the Rugby World Rankings for this week, the 20th of September 2021. So congratulations to the All Blacks. They have secured that number 1 spot. They're immediately going to have to defend it from the Springboks. So that should make that 100th clash between the two sides even more epic. And then the Wallabies need to kind of prove their stuff against the Pumas. But the Pumas did show some improvement against the All Blacks, so we will have to see how they kind of bounce back. Remember, folks, the Premiership has started this week as well in England, so that rugby is back underway. The top 14's been underway for a couple of weeks, and the URC is underway this week, so there's plenty of rugby on, folks. And then come October, November, we've got even more internationals on, so happy days. You guys let me know your thoughts. Do you think these rankings are kind of fair? Would you back Australia or England at the moment based on their rankings? Australia is a very, very slight favourite between those teams, but there's nothing much in it. Anyway, you guys let me know your thoughts, and I'll talk to you again soon. See you later.